Well, it took us far longer than forever to get to this point, but now it's time to finish up the CGI Swan Princess movies with Far Longer Than Forever.
Far longer than forever, I'll hold you in my heart.
Oh, please let this be the last one. This series has had plenty of ups and downs, mostly downs, but this film has a chance to end on a better note. The last movie was a Uberta-centric story, but it did provide some setup on another character who might have his arc resolved. So can these good points carry over from A Fairy Tale Is Born? Let's find out. But first, it is time to say goodbye to our dear friend, the water swirl animation. Even after the shift to CGI, it remained the one constant of this film series. So, following up from last time, we see that Derek overheard what Rogers and Magnus said in the last movie. He demands to know what they're talking about, and he learns that Max is accused of working with pirates. Derek obviously doesn't believe this and chooses to set out and clear his father's name. He plans to meet the council, and Odette comes along with him.
When I was a child, our groundskeeper would say, "It only takes a little smoke to drive a gopher out of its hole."
Because she has to actually contribute to something before the series ends. What's this? A portrait of a black king? Has Richard Rich been forced to include one in this medieval setting? No. We get a look at the council, and besides Sebastian being missing, the members haven't noticeably changed, and right now, Ivan is serving as chairman. Derek is given a chance to address the rumors surrounding his father. Both Edgar and Howard are dismissive towards any ideas that their former peer is still a good guy.
Especially not your double-dealing father,
King Edgar. We will not speak badly of King Maximilian.
With how much of an asshole Edgar is, I'd be willing to bet he's the one behind all this. After the meeting, Derek and Odette are shown around the fortress with paintings of past chairmen, including Ivan's mother. Max doesn't have a portrait because he never liked to pose for paintings, which is probably in character for him. I bet Magnus had to produce his painting of him from memory, and Derek and Odette are then set to leave. However...
Are you alright?
Just think if that wheel came off when we were down there.
Yeah, but in this shot the wheel is still on. Oops. Clearly this is a message from the main villain to stop looking into what happened to Max. But our heroes aren't discouraged, and they decide to stay in this harbor inn run by an overly gossipy woman named... Hagany?
What's the gossip?
And they're going to be staying under the disguise of traveling magicians called the Barrymores. Well, probably the least dumb profession they have in this series, and I guess you can say they're now royally undercover. They tell the innkeeper to keep their presence a secret for obvious reasons.
Hey, Francine! Never mind. Just a couple of nobodies from nowhere.
What?
These two are so good at being magicians that their room has charts connected by strings already. Almost like they're conspiracy theorists or something. Anyway, Hagany is someone who loves to share gossip. She's supposed to be sneaky about it, but in reality, she's pretty dumb for revealing said gossip with charades instead of just writing it down or something.
You're just as a ghost. What does that mean? The Phantom.
Honestly, it'd be kind of funny if they attempted a Phantom Thief storyline. But anyway, Derek and Odette are worried that whatever they discover will implicate the most powerful rulers in the world. So they're gonna need help, and they ask Scully to contact Rogers, who is drawing a picture of himself. Sexily, I might add. Our heroes ask the current harbor master about what happened years ago, though he directs them to someone else who was there before, though at the moment they draw unwanted attention because of them being magicians. Meanwhile, Edgar visits his accountant named Crispin, who, like him, is voiced by Kirby Garrett.
Sit. You sit?
Go ahead, spin.
Geez, Edgar, you really are an asshole. It seems he wants one of Crispin's swords. Well, if we're to assume he really is the big bad for this movie, then we might as well see how he intends to get rid of our heroes. Of course, he needs to realize that these two are the Barrymores, but of course, He doesn't.
Let's say someone wanted to make something disappear, so no one would ask any questions about it.
Wow. How can you mastermind Max's demise whilst being unable to see past these two's charade? It even takes them a moment to realize they're gone after they disappear in a cloud of smoke. Rogers arrives in his pennypecker disguise, and he gets into a debate with Haggany over telling him where his friends are in exchange for secrets.
He's a flirt, and she has a gambling problem. He's a thief. She has a wooden leg. He wears a toupee. Room number.
Once those shenanigans are over, our heroes gather incognito to figure out what to do next. Puffin will check on the former harbor master, whose name is Clem. Speed and Jean-Bob will check on King Edgar, and Rogers and Scully will try to recover Max's journal from the record room. But Haggany eavesdrops on all that chatter and figures out who our heroes are. Meanwhile, Queen Wixom is commissioning Magnus to make a portrait of...
The ill-timed explosion of the fireworks. Enough!
I'll do it.
Magnus, why would you agree to that? I thought you liked Max and Uberta. Considering how Howard is a suspect, you might think that Wixom is in cahoots with the other bad guys. But to spoil things, no. Because later on, Wixom brings the finished portrait to Uberta, which shows the coronation at its greatest instead of its worst. Uberta sees this as Wixom trying to mend bridges, and she's willing to bury the hatchet. And Wixom just accepts it.
Magnus, thank you.
Yeah, this had nothing to do with the Maximilian storyline, but because this subplot takes up a short amount of the runtime, I thought I'd bring it up now. And honestly, it's not bad. Could have done more, but I guess they wanted as much time on the Maximilian plot as possible. Speaking of plot, we have Speed and Jean-Bob arriving at Edgar's private residence. I mean, I suppose they can't all sleep in the fortress, which would also explain why Derek and Odette needed to find an inn. This leads to a kind of funny bit of Speed trying to be a limp dog, only for Jean-Bob to show him up, and attract the attention of a female dog instead of a human. So he escapes into an alley, stops just short of another dog, and... Whenever he tries to find love, he ends up helping others do the same. But his whining did get Edgar's wife to come out and bring Speed inside. He ends up overhearing Edgar writing out something while pictures of pirates hang on the wall.
My friend, a merchant ship, heavy with riches. Venice, come get your turtle dog.
Jean-Bob finally comes back and sneaks into Edgar's room to grab the letter he's sleeping on, though Speed had to convince him through reverse psychology.
It's too hard for you.
Oh, really? Watch me.
I'm gonna throw you overboard.
Over to Puffin, he runs into Clem, who discovers that he's actually a talking bird, and, well...
I can see that might be alarming.
Finally, an appropriate reaction to talking animals. Hell, Clem barely maintains his composure after waking up. But anyway, Puffin asks about what happened to Max, and Clem talks about his memories of Max's ship, and how he got pulled away for some fire in the alleyway, and then when he came back, the ship was leaving.
The council, especially King Edgar, said I was just making up excuses.
Well, it's safe to assume who really is in cahoots with the pirates. Anyway, Rogers gets into the fortress by hang gliding. In broad daylight. At least he's pretty smooth about it.
Yeah, they should have made that table.
When the record keeper leaves his post, they sneak inside and begin looking for the journal. They almost get caught when someone questions him being there, but some extra sneaking around reveals a secret compartment where the journal is held. Sure enough, it has the incriminating entry that shows what Max was doing. Even if Edgar directed the pirates to go after Max, the public probably wasn't open to the idea of negotiating with pirates. It might even be seen as a sign of weakness. But here's the good news. He didn't actually write that.
Look, it's a forgery. I know Max's hand like my own. He never made these little flares on his F's.
You know, I didn't consider that possibility. Because of how the letter F was spelled, our heroes realize that it's a clue to their next destination. They head to Tiff's Tavern, which has those same F's, and the owner, voiced by Evan Garrett, doesn't seem interested in talking. But then Rogers gets him to admit that he made the sign, and thus basically admitting he made the journal entry. Then a setback occurs when our heroes find a newsletter from Haggany, which reveals that Odette and Derek are operating incognito. And given that Edgar tried throwing a dagger at them with the message telling them to go home, it's clear that the bad guys are onto the investigation. So before Odette and friends can continue, they'll need to fool the council and show that the prince and princess aren't pretending to be the Barrymores.
If we fail, your names will be ruined, same as your father's. Forever.
Sounds like a very serious situation. How are they gonna get out of this one? Well, once again, Rogers dons his Pennypecker disguise and tries convincing the council that Odette and Derek aren't the magicians by having them sing a song.
Put the Barrymores to the test.
Can you believe that this is the first song in the movie? We're already halfway through the movie, too. Talk about restraint. The song's visuals are pretty dazzling for 3D animation. I like this last bit where the council members close their eyes and lay their royal hands on the tables. And when they open their eyes, their chairs disappear, except the Barrymores. Edgar seems to suspect something, but...
Didn't they say that it required only a royal's touch?
Then another Derek shows up for the meeting and removes any doubts that he and Odette are up to something. But of course...
Worked! I didn't even notice Pennypacker leave the room during your performance. High five!
Maybe wait until after you leave the castle, in case someone overhears you? They confront Haggany over her attempts to expose them, and now that she's lost all credibility, they pressure her into helping them keep their cover. In return, she gets to be the first to write about what happened to King Maximilian. They also try to broker a deal with Tiff about forging something, and learn that his previous forging job came from a king. And given what the animals found, they all realize that Edgar is behind the conspiracy. They could get him to confess, but instead our heroes settle for someone else who could spill the beans, that being Crispin. They interrogate him under a new disguise.
My name is Mr. Smith, and this is Mrs. Smith.
And that's Smith with a Y.
Okay.
So we learned that Crispin was part of the Firebeard Pirates. Cool name, not gonna lie. And they were hired to kill Max and steal his ship.
We dropped him in a small boat and let the current take him to Unscapable Island.
No one has ever returned from that island. It's under an ancient spell.
That said, Crispin feels guilty for what he did, so he points our heroes to Firebeard to learn who hired his crew. Of course, he doesn't know where he is right now, which means it's time to see if Edgar has a map of the pirates' location, and Speed is given the task in finding it, while everyone else distracts the bad guy. It seems Edgar is onto them, and...
I Was a Pirate Bride by Edgar Rex?
My penny.
So, yeah, turns out those pictures and book covers were only part of his pirate-themed book series. So you mean to tell me he was a red herring this whole time? Well, back to square one, but Crispin says that he found Firebeard and decided to rejoin his crew while bringing 2 new members.
A pirate ship is no place for a queen.
I'll be a queen tomorrow.
But a pirate today.
Just like the other movie. But seriously, why didn't they do this plotline sooner? Still, this is probably the coolest thing these two have ever done. They disguise themselves as pirates and infiltrate a pirate ship. Derek has locks and a big nose, while Odette mostly dyed her hair black. Firebeard is reluctant to have her join, even when the other crew members want her as a cook. And here's how she responds.
The only thing I've ever stitched was my own busted skull once or twice. And the only hungry mouths I'll ever fill are the sharks.
Seriously, there's a lot of potential in having a pirate plot with the main characters. Why the hell didn't they do that? Enough time passes that Derek and Odette convince Firebeard to tell them about Maximilian. He pretty much confirms what Crispin told them already, but now we learn who it was who hired them.
We
exchange for our little performance, Ivan promised to get rid of all me pirate rivals, and that he did.
I always knew there was something terrible about Ivan. I mean, he wasn't as openly obnoxious as Edgar, but there were hints of his resentment toward Max. Keep in mind, he was dismissive about the idea of reaching out to thieves and opposed Max's appointment as chairman in the last movie.
What?
He also tried to destroy the journal before William stopped him, and was only avoiding suspicion because of how Edgar and Howard acted like jerks. Props to the writers for coming up with a less cartoony narrative for once. Bravo! Back to the plot, Firebeard blows Derek's cover when he noted the prince's royal grip when pulling back an arrow. Guess the captain knew all along and was toying with our heroes. Odette and Derek now have to escape, and luckily Crispin is there to help them.
Long live Derek and Odette!
That sounded like flesh being cut. This movie is already more intense than the other CGI movies combined. All that's left is to get Ivan to confess his crimes. And this is done by Derek scaring him while disguised as Max's ghost as the others record the conversation. Okay, in fairness, it is dark and Ivan probably isn't thinking straight after just being woke up. But yeah, Derek gets him to reveal the truth of why he murdered him.
I was supposed to be the next head of the council. Then here you come with your sickening acts of mercy and...
Figures. You were mad that a former peasant got to be chairman before you. I think this would be enough to convict him, but here's the clincher.
Confess your crimes!
Yes, I did it all.
On one hand, it might be a little disappointing that the big bad was defeated this easily, but on the other hand, this part of the storyline was one big mystery, so we didn't need a magical villain this time. Tiff gets arrested for his involvement, and Hogany gets her exclusive story. Only thing left to do is see what happened to Max in the unescapable island.
My father deserves to be buried in his own kingdom.
Okay, but shouldn't you have one of your royal ships instead of this small boat? They make it so dire, like they might not see each other again. That's partly because, again, the island has a spell on it that makes it look normal when it's anything but.
Derek! What? Derek!
Oh, so the secret is the island is made of rocks. But between the rough waves and losing his boat, it looks like Derek is done for this time.
Dad? Derek? I knew you'd come.
You look good for a guy who's been stuck on this island for over 20 years. I mean, he probably had to fish every day, but where'd he get his fresh water from? Derek telling his dad how much he loves him removes the spell that's on the island. Sure. Now they just need Scully to get a ship to take them home. Word spreads of Maximilian's safe return, so even the other royals show up to greet him, mirroring how Wixom is now friends with Uberta, who's really happy to reunite with her husband.
As pretty as the day we met.
My heart is healed.
Aw. Oh, and Crispin is revealed to have survived and Max pardons him. And after a song, Max returns to being chairman while Derek and Odette take over for Uberta in running the kingdom. And so we wind down this movie, and the entire series, with everyone ready to do some catching up.
Proud to be royalty, you know? Never mind, you don't know.
Okay, this one had the usual humor that's typical for the series, but the story and characterization is still pretty solid. This movie and its predecessor are both good on their own or put together. The first introduces a pair of royals who care about their subjects, and while their arcs get suspended and stretched to 2 movies, that gives us plenty of time to focus on Uberta's character. And since Max was well written in his own right, it was fun to watch his storyline resolve and tie up loose ends. Because of that, this 2-parter was more cohesive than Kingdom of Music and A Royal Wedding. Besides the inconsistent animation, I couldn't help but wonder what happened to Elise and Lucas. You'd think they'll at least be there to see Max return, but nope. Guess they're not that important for the finale, and that's a shame. I also kind of wanted to see Max react to the talking animals since he is going to be living with them from now on. A lot has changed since his disappearance, so maybe one more movie that could give these characters a proper send-off while calling back to the roots of... No! I don't want to jinx it. Better let things end on a high, or at least a decent note, than end on something like Christmas or a royal wedding. Regardless of how you feel about this series, I'm actually quite glad to have spent all that time watching these movies. There's clearly some creative thought and effort put into it, and while those instances were far and few between, they started to become more common near the end of the larger story. Maybe it's from knowing that the series will end that the writing is focused on telling a good plot, as opposed to wasting time and stretching the franchise well past the breaking point, but even at its worst, it's far from the bottom tier crap I've seen on this show. And while I still think the Swan Princess film series lasted far longer than it needed to, part of me was glad that it did. It ended on a good note, and that's fine with me. I'm the Media Hunter. Media's my prey, and reviewing them my way.
Far longer than forever, as constant as a star.